welcome to Smaulgld. In case you missed it, top gold and silver stories for the weekend of December 26, 2016. Reevaluating Bitcoin. The war on cash expands. India, Venezuela, Europe, Pakistan, Australia are among the sovereign issuers that have pulled or considered pulling their currencies. We've seen in India where they demonetized the rupee. Venezuela did the same. Europe is talking about eliminating larger notes. Australia eliminating the $100 note. Pakistan, as we'll see in a story later in the podcast, is also considering pulling their 5,000 rupee note. And against this backdrop, gold and silver are not soaring, but Bitcoin certainly is. As you can see, I now accept Bitcoin. It's not an endorsement of Bitcoin. It's just that some people do wish to donate to Smaulgld via Bitcoin, and I'm more than happy to accept Bitcoin now. Top news, a terrorist truck attack in Berlin was the main story of the week. A driver hijacked a truck and drove it into a Christmas market, killing more than a dozen people, which the mainstream media initially reported as a crash. Top economic news, India's war on cash continues and Bitcoin soars. What I like to do today is to reevaluate Bitcoin. When Bitcoin first came into, let's say, national prominence, I think it was the end of 2013 when it soared to $1,000 a Bitcoin, I immediately took a look at it and wasn't impressed. I saw the price rise as the sign of a bubble, and then I wasn't impressed with the whole concept of a digital currency because I have some issues with digital currencies in general. And since then, I've reevaluated Bitcoin, not because I think Bitcoin has changed or is any better than it was 3 or 4 years ago, but because the fiat currencies are so much worse and have done so many things that I never even thought they were capable of doing that it makes Bitcoin look a lot better. So let's go quickly through. People have also asked me what are my thoughts on Bitcoin, and I haven't written on Bitcoin in 3 or 4 years. I wrote a series of articles on Bitcoin a while back, and I haven't really spoken much about it since, and I've gotten a few requests to discuss Bitcoin. So here it is. Now, the cons of Bitcoin, I view Bitcoin as having the same or many of the same flaws as digital fiat currency. It has no intrinsic value. It's not a digital representation of anything other than itself. So it's not like it represents in digital form a certain amount of gold or oil or silver or some commodity. No, a Bitcoin is a Bitcoin, and it represents a Bitcoin, which is self-identifying as a Bitcoin. Bitcoin requires electricity or an internet device to work. If there's a solar flare, internet goes down, Bitcoin becomes nearly worthless. Sure, you can probably trade your digits manually with someone, but that defeats the whole purpose of a digital currency. It's potentially trackable and hackable, and it's in many government crosshairs. There's no issuer, so if there's an issue with something that goes wrong with Bitcoin, there's no one to complain to. There's no proprietor that owns Bitcoin. And since it requires no natural resources, it's based on open code, an infinite number of other cryptocurrencies can be based upon it, including those by government. Now, that should probably be enough to say, well, I want nothing to do with Bitcoin. However, if you take Bitcoin and you judge it versus fiat currencies issued by sovereign states and governments in their digital form, it stands up pretty well. I'll give you an example. No person or governmental entity, Congress or president or prime minister, can unilaterally recall or change the terms of Bitcoin itself. We saw Richard Nixon. There was an international treaty. The Bretton Woods Agreement said that the US dollar was to be backed by gold. And if a foreign central bank that was a signatory to the Bretton Woods Agreement wanted gold for their dollars, the United States would give it to them. Dollars as good as gold. Then Nixon just decided, he discussed with his Treasury Secretary. They said, look, we're running out of gold. And Nixon went on TV, interrupted a TV broadcast of, I think it was Gunsmoke, and just said, look, we're not going to do it anymore. I've instructed the Secretary of Treasury to close the gold window, and there you go. Dollars is no longer backed by gold. So Modi, Prime Minister of India, did the same thing. Went on TV and said, guess what? Those rupee notes you have, those 500 and 1,000 rupee notes you have, they're not worth anything unless you turn them in or exchange them, and you got, otherwise they're not worth anything in a day. That can't happen to Bitcoin. Now you would say, okay, that's not really a feature of Bitcoin. Well, it is if we realize now that any of these countries can do it. They could just say, those $100 notes are not worth anything anymore. You got to turn them in. You got to put them into the bank. And maybe you won't be able to put them in the bank. Maybe you're overseas. You can't put them into the bank. Maybe they limit like Venezuela did. They said you can only put a certain amount in the bank. The rest of them, we're not going to honor those notes. Bitcoin can't do that to you. You have a Bitcoin, you have a Bitcoin. You have a fraction of a Bitcoin, you have it. It's yours. It's part of the system. There's no one, and this is where there's no issuer, no one can tell you they're not going to honor it. It's just, it is what it is. And that's an advantage of Bitcoin. And again, you don't have to deposit your Bitcoin into a bank, into any type of like a Coinbase. You don't, to give it value, you don't have to do anything with it. It just is. You don't have to exchange them for like you Bitcoin or almost like Bitcoin to give them value, like you see with the fiat currencies. Your rupees are no good unless you put them into the bank or you exchange it for new rupees. Well, Bitcoin doesn't have that. That's that you would say, well, that's, of course it doesn't have that. Well, you would think fiat currencies, they wouldn't be allowed to do that, but we're seeing now that they can do that. Pakistan wants to do the same thing. They want to pull the 5,000 rupee note from circulation. In effect, there's no expiration date. Again, just like the currencies that sovereign countries issue to you. You've got lots of $100 Australian notes, and the government says, well, you got 2 weeks to turn them in. You got 3 days to turn them in. That, in effect, has an expiration date on it. If you don't turn them in, you've lost your money. So hoarding cash could be dangerous. The government can say any $100 bills that are now in circulation are no longer worth anything unless you can bring them to a bank and prove where you got them from, or exchange them for other notes. Otherwise, they've expired. Again, Bitcoin doesn't have that feature or the ability of the issuer to unilaterally declare your currency worthless. Bitcoin doesn't perform QE, doesn't make policy changes, doesn't issue government guarantees, doesn't pull those guarantees. Another one, Bitcoin can't kick you off the system like a government can do. They can decide, I don't care how much money you have, we're not going to let you participate in the banking system. We're going to seize your bank account. That can't happen with Bitcoin. And I wrote an article, I also did a podcast, See the Dark Side of a Cashless Society. That's a real threat. The government can seize your bank account. And you could have done something wrong, or maybe you didn't do anything wrong. It doesn't matter. That can't happen with Bitcoin. There's no place for them to seize anything unless you keep your Bitcoin in a third-party entity, for example, like Coinbase. But if you have your Bitcoin, they really can't seize it. They don't even know you have it. There's also no limit to how many Bitcoin you can have. You go to the bank and you try to get out, I don't know, never done it. I just wanted to go get out of the bank. But if you try to take out a certain amount of money out of the bank, you will get all types of questions. And they might not even have it for you. With Bitcoin, whatever Bitcoin you have. And since it's not backed by anything, you have it. You don't have to worry that the bank doesn't have enough notes to cover your Bitcoin. There's just a one-to-one correspondence between the amount of Bitcoin you have, and you can have as many of them as you want. However, there is a limit to how many Bitcoin there are in general, so you're limited by the amount of Bitcoin that'll eventually be mined and put in circulation. And again, that's another, you can say, well, that's an artificially created construct. Sure, I can invent a currency and say there's only going to be this many. And I'm really not that impressed with that, except that in contrast to other fiat currencies, which are Bitcoin is not a fiat currency. Bitcoin is an unbacked currency. But for unbacked fiat currencies, they can issue as many as they want. So again, Bitcoin has this, whether it's artificial or not, they have this advantage in the system that at least once you've bought into the concept of Bitcoin, there's only a certain number of Bitcoin that will ever be in existence, and there's no one or person or entity or group of people that can change that. There's nothing also, now this is a feature. It's also, to me, it's a detraction. When I first looked at Bitcoin, I said, what does it represent? Well, it doesn't represent anything. It's just, but it's better than gold. I said, why? Well, if they ever want to seize gold they can come and take it, but Bitcoin, there's nothing to take. And I thought, okay. So they basically, because they can't take something, is worth something. And that was very hard for me to understand. And, the concept of e-gold, where they actually, what they did was they shut down e-gold. They found out where e-gold was holding the gold on behalf of the people who had digital representation of the amount of gold they had in e-gold, and they took it. Well, you can't do that to Bitcoin. There's nothing to take. And it's not all in one place. It's decentralized. So because of that, that actually turns out to be a feature. And as long as people are willing to believe that nothing is worth something because it's part of a system, and other people think it's worth something, and the free market thinks it's worth something, well, then that becomes an advantage because that something is difficult for someone to take other than in the individual, or if they're all put into a depository like Coinbase or Mt. Gox or something like that. But otherwise, there's no way you can go and take the Bitcoin away from the people because it's all decentralized. It's not in one place to take. And again, there's no issuer that can break these rules. The rules are set by math. They're set by the number of Bitcoin. They're set by the mining. So there's no way that someone can decide to break the law. Now we have a constitution in the United States, but it's put in the hands of people. People can break those laws, and they do. And you can see they can break treaties. So when people are in charge of currencies, the currency is only as good as not just the confidence in the currency, but also in the honesty of the issuer. And when we've seen when they do QE, that is a direct assault on the currency. So Bitcoin can't attack itself, can't devalue itself the way fiat currencies can and have done. Another advantage of Bitcoin is that you can transport it. You get it. And I used to think, well, that's fine. Well, that doesn't give it any value to me. If I ever need, which I probably don't think I ever will, but you never know, to transport money across state or country lines without just in a way that it can be done easily, I could just, on the day that I need to do it, I convert my fiat currency into Bitcoin, send it to Nicaragua or wherever I might be going. So this is why it seemed far-fetched to me. So I thought, why would there be value in that? Because that's an outlier. It's not like something that I anticipate I would do or many people would have a need to do. But where it came to my mind where this was an advantage is it's an insurance. I think, well, I'll just do that if I ever need to do it the day before. But you may not have that warning. For example, in India, maybe you don't want to move the money out of the country, but you don't want your rupees to be declared worthless overnight, or you don't want to have to stand in line to make them worth something for three. And here with Bitcoin, if you have your Bitcoin in advance, it's insurance that it's going to be there, and you can transfer it. You do whatever you want with it. And again, there's not much you can do with it physically, intrinsically, but you have its value and it doesn't go anywhere, and it can go with you where you send it. Whereas with a fiat currency, they could take it from you and you can't convert it into Bitcoin. You can't do anything. You may be able to hold on to your rupees, but they've already told you those rupees aren't worth anything. So again, the advantage to Bitcoin, and a friend of mine on Twitter described it pretty well, is that Bitcoin is a digital hedge against digital fiat currencies. And I think that's where I stand now. I don't believe in digital currencies, unbacked currencies, fiat currencies. But if that's the way the world is run, at least Bitcoin has a much more honest approach to it, and it's objective. No one can come in and change it, kick you off the system, change the value, change the number of your Bitcoin. So the more we see these egregious offenses by sovereign issuers against their own currencies, the better Bitcoin looks. Now, this has nothing to do with comparing it to gold or silver. I just wanted to compare Bitcoin to sovereign fiat and sovereign fiat digital currencies. Okay, let's get to the week in review. It's short. Not a lot happened. It was a short week. Gold was unchanged at 11.33, down about $1. Silver continued to fall, down about 2% to 15.73. Gold silver ratio at 72 to 1. Click at this link here on the blog post. I'll put a link below. You can see it. I've got all the gold silver ratio charts. Daily chart, monthly chart, 5-year chart, 10-year chart. Gold silver ratio is still very elevated. Chart of the week. Here's a sad one. Dow Jones versus spot gold. Well, this year it looks like the Dow Jones was the place to be, not gold. Takes 17. It's a 17-to-1 ratio, gold to the Dow. And you could see at one point gold was doing better than the Dow, and then we had the Trump effect, and then boom, down went gold, and up went the Dow. Here's your invitation to donate via PayPal. If you don't have Bitcoin, you can also donate via PayPal. I appreciate the donations that I get. It almost covers the expenses. I'm getting there. Thank you very much. And let's see what we had during the week. Oh, in India, first, this whole thing has been a mess for India. Of course, it is a country of about a billion people, and you just decide their currency is going to be worth nothing in a couple of days. Bound to have problems. No matter how much you thought it through, it doesn't seem like they thought it through that well anyway. But first, they limited the amount of cash you could exchange because they had a number. They said you can only exchange a certain amount of your rupees, and then you couldn't even exchange that amount because they didn't have enough to exchange. Now they've limited the amount of, and that made you have to put the money in the bank. Now they're limiting the amount of money you can put in the bank. So basically, you're going to take a haircut on your rupees if you've got more than a few of them because you either couldn't exchange them because of the limit, or you were okay with the limit, but then they didn't have enough new notes to give you, or now you can't put all you have into the bank. Venezuela did the same thing. They said, you can put them in the bank, but only in reasonable amounts, whatever that means. It means as many as they're willing to accept in exchange. During the week, though it wasn't a very busy week in the world, we did put out a number of blog posts, and there's a review here and podcast. We did a summary of the American Silver Eagle sales in 2016. They were down 20%. You can click on the link. You can check out the YouTube. There's a lot of information on the sales of Silver Eagles in 2016, which were down. Interested in buying Silver Eagles? I'm not recommending that you do, but if you are interested in buying them, you can compare prices and shipping on Smaulgld and at the links below this YouTube video. And if you do purchase them, I get a small commission. I appreciate that. People have been buying decent amounts of gold and silver. I can't really tell whether it's gold or silver, but they're buying decent amounts from the gold and silver bullion dealers on the Smaulgld site and from the YouTube channel. So I appreciate that very much, because I get a very small commission, but still it helps. Russia, we reported on Central Bank of Russia adding 1 million ounces of gold to its reserves in November. That follows 1.3 million ounces that they added to reserves in October. So you can see, click on the link, click on the YouTube, and you can check out what Russia's been doing. It's funny, I did a blog post about 2 months ago where I read a story that there was rumors Russia was going to sell its gold. Since then, they've added 2.3 million ounces. Nice story. Fake news. Pakistan, I mentioned this. Pakistan war on cash. Pakistan Senate proposes scrapping 5,000 rupee notes. See, once one country gets away with it or thinks they get away with it, they all start to do it. There's another invitation. Wow, a lot of invitations to donate to Smaulgld. Okay. Gold. American Gold Eagle sales were up 30%, unlike the Silver Eagle sales, which were down. Same story goes here. There's a blog post. There is a YouTube video, all the information, and your invitation to buy gold, if you wish, through the Smaulgld affiliates that are listed on the site and below this YouTube. So please check out the gold sales for the year of American Gold Eagles. India backs off on questioning depositors. I guess they've already put the Indian people, the honest Indian people, through a lot just to try to get a few, or not a few, or however many tax cheats or whatever black money is out there. They've put the whole country at a major inconvenience, and they were starting to have the people at the bank question people where they got the money, and it seems they've backed off on that. I guess I don't want to poke them in the eye any further. U.S. economic data, home sales were up a bit. Not bad. I guess a lot of people are considering that interest rates are going up, and if they somehow have the means to buy a home, it's probably best to get that mortgage before the interest rates go higher. Was an article in Bloomberg about gold miners potentially running out of gold. You can check out that story at the website. There was an interesting story that wasn't confirmed that India is considering lowering its import duty from 10% to 6% We'll see what happens. That would probably help gold imports, although until the Indians square away their ability to spend their currency, meaning there's either enough cash or somehow they've managed to convert enough people to digital, it's going to be hard for many rural Indians to buy gold, irrespective of the price, unless they can get their hands on cash or somehow gain access to banking services. De-dollarization, Putin said Russia may one day join the euro. That's an interesting, given that the United States has forced Europe to put sanctions on Europe. Putin's talking about joining the euro one day. And I guess with Donald Trump, who's supposedly a Russian agent, the two will work together and maybe Europe and Russia will get along, and maybe the United States and Russia will get along. I don't know. Personal spending was not up as much in November as they expected it, and income was down. So it's not good when people spend money, more money than they make. And that's what happened in November. Initial claims are also higher. I don't know if this is a trend. The employment is still, I think it's 4.6 unemployment. Although the third quarter GDP final estimate was at 3.5%. Still, the first 2 quarters were about under 2%. So we'll see what happens in the fourth quarter and whether the 2016 ends up with anything over 2% for the whole year in GDP. New home sales are up, but again, I have done a chart. I don't have the link here, but these new home sales under 600,000, even though they look like they're up tremendously over the last 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, they are still at levels far below 10 years ago, far below 20 years ago. They're at levels last seen in the 60s and 70s when the population was about 60% lower than it is today. I mean, you used to have 210 million people. You now have 350 million people, and you're still selling less than 600,000 homes a month. So this whole housing recovery thing is nonsense when they say it's a housing recovery. The prices are higher. Yeah, the prices are high. If you want to call that a recovery, sales are down. Home ownership rate is down, the lowest since the 60s. And why? They're too expensive. That was a conscious effort by the Fed to make home prices more expensive. I will be doing a dark side series on rising home prices and what that means, and it's not good. The last thing we have is I did an overall view of the U.S. Mint gold sales, which includes not just the American Gold Eagle, 10th ounce, quarter ounce, half ounce, and 1 ounce, but also the 1 ounce American Gold Buffalo coins. Put them together, they were the highest sales since 2010. They were 1.204 million ounces of gold sold by the U.S. Mint in 2016. That about does it. I want to wish you a belated Merry Christmas. And for those who don't celebrate Christmas, I hope you had a happy holidays. Please sign up for Smaulgld and also subscribe to this channel. Follow us on Twitter. Thank you very much.